continuing with the program, we move on swiftly to textual skill number 5, and you know, any decent film festival could not do without Meryl Streep, and in that role we have got Karolina Kotorowicz-Jasińska, who's going to talk about summarizing the text.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rosińska?
Rosińska? Yes. So whatever. All right. Now, I'm pretty sure that you will agree with me that, well, given the character of this event and the fact that we are pressed for time, what really matters for me right now is that I keep it short. And funnily enough, this is exactly what I'm going to talk about within the next 20 minutes. For the next 20 minutes, like I said, I am going to focus on the skill summarizing. This is what I'm going to introduce to you today, or perhaps I shall say summarizing, right? Because in those 3 words, those 3 words are the acronym of what really matters in summarizing, but in very general and broad terms. In other words, if you want to summarize a text, you first of all need to shorten it, right? A summary is into pieces for you, dismantle it in a more academic way, and in order to do that, I'd like to use the taxonomy developed by Graebe, right? And this taxonomy divides the comprehension processes into 2 major groups. One is called lower level processes, the other one higher level processes, something that Marta has already pinpointed pretty well. This is the first one will be understanding words or reading for words. The second one will be reading for comprehension or reading for meaning. Now, I feel that it is mandatory that something be explained at this point. Well, Graebe is a theoretician, a scholar who researches reading and reading skills, and he developed that taxonomy with reading skills in mind. However, from a cognitive point of view, and that's what I would like to do today, take you on a kind of short cognitive trip, right? From the cognitive point of view, the skills of comprehension, understanding skills are exactly the same whatever the mode, be it spoken or written. Comprehension skills are the same whatever the language, whatever the code. So the skills that I'm going to talk about are the same in Polish, in English, in speaking, in listening and in reading, okay? Having said that, let us focus on what you can see on this particular slide. First of all, on the left side, you've got the lower level processes. Let me underline at this point that lower here does not mean less important or easier. On the contrary, lower level processes, which are all about decoding the language, that is understanding the words, phrases and sentences, are the absolute minimum, the kind of the starting point for any comprehension, for any text comprehension to take place. This is something that Jacek talked about in greater detail. You need to understand the words. However, as you can most probably guess at this point, this is far from enough when you want to summarize a text. And in order to summarize a text, a learner, a student, a reader or a listener has to be pretty good at the higher level processes as well. In other words, you need to focus on the main ideas. You need to build a certain model text of comprehension. This is the idea of a text that remains in your mind, in your memory, after you've read something or after you have listened to it, okay? Again, higher level processes does not mean that they are, I don't know, more important or harder, although quite often they are. What it really means is that they require a certain conscious introspection on the part of the reader. There is no sliding over a text. You need to go deeply into that particular text, like I said, be it spoken or written. And mind you that in real life, this is exactly what we do. When you read an interesting article in your real life, there are rarely some comprehension questions that follow that you need to answer or tick yes or no, right? What happens is that you read it, you keep some kind of recollection in your mind of that particular text and of that information. And when the time comes, like a topic appears in a social conversation, right? This is when you said, there's something interesting that I've recently read about, okay? So those high-level processes actually reflect the way we read and listen to, or general terms, we process texts in real life. Now let me, because at this point it kind of might sound a bit daunting as to something to be developed in the classroom, right? So let me translate this into more human terms. In other words, what does the reader need to do to summarize a text? Well, when you read a text, you first need to decode the language, and that's a must. Then you need to pinpoint the main ideas, determine what is really important in it, and build that text model in your mind. And mind you, that all of these refer to reception. But well, summarizing is not just that, because what follows is that you need to use your own words to paraphrase that model, right, of a text, and you need to transpose it, in other words, use it in a different context, say it in different words, shorten it at some point, right? So, Krzysiek, I really know that you said that your skill was the most complex and more the most difficult, but somehow I feel that this is the skill of summarizing that is, well, extremely complex, because it not only entails reception, but also a great deal of production. I am going to add a few bits and pieces to it, because if you want to summarize a spoken text, you need to add some memorization to it, because, well, due to the ephemeral nature of listening, there is no way to refer back to what you have read or what is in the text, right? And, surprise, surprise, a little bit of note-taking. Now, I'm pretty sure that you can see now how complex the skill of summarizing actually is. And this is why I believe it cannot be taught or developed as one entity. It's absolutely impossible. This is, by the way, why students don't know how to summarize texts, right? Because nobody teaches them those bits and pieces. I'm not talking about English. I'm talking about all the other subjects, right? Students don't know. They read a text in history, they can't summarize it. They read a text in Polish, they don't know how to summarize it. So here's my remedy. Why don't we focus on several bits and pieces which are teachable, manageable in the classroom, and make this complex skill of summarizing a bit more down to earth. Now, what do we do and how do we go about that behind classroom doors? To begin with, we might use a effective, well-balanced course book material, right? And I will start with just that. First, I'm going to present a few examples from Password Reset and then from Checkpoint, how the skill of summarizing is developed in these two courses. Let me start with Password. You will find a number of activities in which students have to write their own summary or complete a ready-made template of a summary. What can we do about such texts in the classroom? Well, you ask students to read the text. This is a text about neuroplasticity, mind you, not skim the text and not scan it, but carefully read it. Before students engage in writing or completing a template of a summary, if you want to provide some extra help, you might ask some signpost questions. Signpost questions provide some kind of a guideline. They help students navigate through texts. For instance, what is the text about? What do you learn from it? What examples of recovery does the author give? Particular questions to a particular text, which, you know what they will help students do? Well, adopt a certain bird's eye view of the text. Look at the text holistically, not on the particular words and phrases in it, right? Why? Why is it so important? Because this is how you build a text model of comprehension in your mind. The next step that follows is for students to complete a summary of the text that they have read in exercise 3. A very important comment that I'd like to make at this point is that those signpost questions do not need to be in English at all, right? Signpost questions such as o czym jest tekst? Odpowiedź maksymalnie 4 słowami. O jakich 2 faktach informuje ten tekst? Will help us develop the same skill. Mind you, from the cognitive point of view, the skill of summarizing is exactly the same, whatever the language and whatever the mode, okay? Such signpost questions will be particularly important for one extra reason. This is the type of task that chances are our students will have to do in the new format of the exam. This is, we haven't seen the format yet, but knowing what happened in the 8th graders exam this year, knowing what, the new core curriculum includes, chances are that students will read a text or 2 texts in English, and they will have to complete their summary or its summary in Polish, okay? Now, another example of summarizing is the following. Now, I would say that Marta here has done a great job of kind of developing that skill of summarizing from a cognitive point of view. Marta is the author of the course book that I'm talking about. Perhaps I should add that, right? That the skill of summarizing is kind of developed in a way that, it is extremely probable that students will read or listen to an English text and will have to report on it using their mother tongue. All right then. One more example, this time paraphrasing, right? I said that one of the elements of writing a good summary is also the skill of paraphrasing. We obviously, develop that skill of paraphrasing in all sorts of use of English activities. Thank you. In all sorts of use of English activities, but, and this is what you will find in password reset, students are expected to do that. Listen to the sentences 1 to 6 and then paraphrase the information to complete the sentences below, right? Mind you that 3 of them are in English, but the last 3 are in Polish. And these are the kinds of activities that will prepare our students, and this is someone stubborn. Okay, they will help our students develop the skill of summarizing both in English and in Polish. Now off to Checkpoint. I would say that one of the greatest assets of this course book is the fact that it teaches this or develops the skill of note-taking in a very systematic way, for which I believe Monica takes credit here, right? So, in Checkpoint, students will have to take notes, listen to text, and take notes for a number of reasons. For example, here, complete a summary of the recording. Or, like in this one, complete the main points of the text that they hear. Or, like in this particular exercise, students are expected to note down, to take notes in the definitions. An interesting exercise there's a recording about two types of people, and then the activity that follows is the following. In your own notebook, summarize in 3 sentences why being broad-minded can make you a happy person, using the information from number 3, that is using your notes, right? So mind you that this summarizing is not about just, read the text and write a summary. This is put down into pieces. A little bit of paraphrasing, a little bit of sentence completion, a little bit of note-taking, changing your notes into 3, 4, or 5 sentence summary. Now, what happens if your activities do not offer such a choice of, if the course book that you work with do not offer such a choice of activities? In other words, what else matters, right? And now I'd like to present a few activities which are, easily implemented into your lesson scenario, without much preparation, so they can be completely impromptu, and which will also help help you develop the skill of summarizing and help your students, score or nail the Matura exam. For example, in this particular text, students read a text about a guy who invented a pill which is likely to replace food in the future. Mind you, what would happen if you read this in your real life? You are having decoded the language, right? You would probably engage in some higher level processes. That is, determine the main ideas, build a text model of comprehension, so keep a recollection of that text, keep those main ideas in your head, and the next time the subject comes up in a social situation, look, there's an interesting article that I've read, okay? And you are going to summarize it, right? Now, I'm giving this example because it shows that summarizing is a very natural thing, and it's a part of how we read in everyday life. Hence, the natural responses, or encouraging students to respond to a text in a natural kind of everyday casual way, will also help them develop the skill of summarizing. For instance, what surprised you or what shocked you the most in that particular text? Would you consider changing your diet at all, right? We might also, the same version of natural responses by Deller and Watley, finish the sentences. I'd like to know more about what I found the most incredible in the article is that, and so on, okay? One more example of a activity that promotes summarizing texts, summarizing written text, is text reconstruction. For example, students read a text about, this one is about some kind of movement in San Francisco. You ask them to read the text and underline the key information, then write the information on a separate piece of paper so that students can close the book and look at the text no more. Then ask them to look those use the key information in order to write a summary of the text. Okay? And this is just that. You present a summary, you create a summary, but you use your own notes. How about spoken texts, right? Again, I believe in the power of note-taking. This is what I wrote my PhD thesis on, to be honest. Now, one of the activities that you might actually introduce is to ask students to listen with their books closed, right? Okay. Look what happens. You tell them, okay, you're going to listen to a recording, open your books, and instead of really listening, instead of building a text model of comprehension like we do normally in the cognitive science kind of way, students just focus on those detailed questions. Let's skip that. I'll not skip that. Let's leave it for later. First, play the recording and ask students to just listen to the recording and take notes. Then listen to the recording, take notes, and summarize the text using your own notes. If you feel that this might be a bit too challenging for your learners, you might kind of reverse the order and provide the notes for your learners. On the board, before students listen to the recording, on the board, write the keywords from the text that students are about to listen, okay? With their books closed, students listen to the recording, and what they really do is focus on the information, on the meaning. These keywords are supposed to, guide them through the text and help them or navigate them through the text. What happens later on, with the book still closed, keep the detailed questions for later, ask students now to use what they remember and the words on the board to tell you what the text was about, right? In other words, create a short summary. If, after all, you decide to add a little bit of extra challenge, why not ask students to use those words in English to create a short summary in Polish, okay? Because, like I said, from the cognitive point of view, understanding text is the same, whatever the language, that is, whatever the code and whatever the mode. So, in short, and again, a short summary, right? So, What is it that I believe we need to remember about when we need to help learners develop the skill of summarizing, which I'm sure that you will agree with me at this point, is kind of complex. To begin with, encourage natural responses, because this is what we do in real life. In real life, we build a text model of comprehension in our minds, right? Cognitively, and with natural responses like this. So what do you think about the text? Which of the facts from this article would you, I don't know, pass on to your friend who is interested in something, and so on. Then ask for text reconstruction. Shorter version, longer version, make it limited. I don't know, how many characters are you allowed to use on Twitter? It used to be 40. Now I'm not sure, but I've heard that it's been changed. But you might ask for a text reconstruction which would, fit a Twitter post. And finally, whatever course book that you work with, always have your minds open and exploit the course book material that is already there. Thank you very much for your attention.